What's up guys, it's the new sensation, Bigger Notation here, and today I'm going to be bringing you a deck profile for my version of the green-blue Majin Buu deck. So this is a very interesting deck, and I really like this deck personally, because it's quite innovative. I feel like it's a lot different to like the standard deck that you might see. And obviously the green Majin Buu leader is fairly underplayed. It's not the kind of thing that you'll see topping regularly at events. It's very like rogue tier, but I think that it has a lot of potential, especially with this particular green-blue build. And I think that people definitely sleep on this leader. It's definitely a very, very strong leader, and it's one that utilizes the spirit boost mechanic to an actual effective degree, which is of course very nice as well, because that's not something that we see really in this game yet. Just because Spirit Boost kind of died on arrival, and it only got used within a few certain small number of very, very strong cards that are very good on their own, rather than a whole archetype. So to get straight on with the deck, well, first of all, if you guys enjoy the content and enjoy the video, I definitely recommend subscribing and liking the video. And also checking out my streams. I'm streaming regularly twice a week at least now, on Tuesdays and Fridays. So my stream link will be in the description as always. And for those of you who have been watching the streams, you will have seen me probably play this deck on one of my streams. I played it in a Upper Hand Super Series Locals tournament, and I managed to go 2-1 with it, which was extremely fun. And I've also got the gameplay up on my channel. I'll have a link to the gameplay in the description as well, for those that want to see this deck in action. But without further ado, we'll get straight into the deck. So for those that don't know the leader, because a lot of people probably don't know what this leader does, I definitely didn't know what this leader does until I started experimenting with this green-blue package. On the front side, when it attacks, you place a card from your life underneath it and then draw 2. So you're critting a life effectively every attack on your front side, which is kind of a pain, but it gives you some fairly good self-awakening. And because you're drawing 2 cards, it's effectively like you're adding the card from your life to your hand and then drawing a card, which is kind of a standard for front side leaders these days, or at least aggressive leaders. And then having the extra card under your leader is actually very important for the deck, because you have a lot of union absorb skills that require you to have cards under your leader. Then he's got an activate main where you can spirit boost 1, and then you choose a battle card in your opponent's drop area that costs 4 or less. You place it under your leader, and then you can choose a keyword skill on that battle card, and it gains the keyword skill for the turn. So you can gain things like double strike or critical. Often in the early game, this is not hugely relevant, and the main reason that you would do this is to get cards under your leader for more union absorbing. But there are times where it's relevant, where your opponent might combo off like a couple of double strikers, and you just add them to under your leader and then gain double strike. Like often against Gogeta Zeno, if they have the 1-drop Goku that has double strike and they're comboing it off to try and fend off some of your attacks, you can absorb that and give your leader double strike. But most of the time you're swinging with your leader quite early on in the turn, just to get the draw so you can see what you're going to be doing in the turn. So most of the time you're using this just to get the card under your leader. And then its awaken is when your life is at 4 or less, you untap 1, draw 1. And then on the back side, it just goes to a standard: when this card attacks, draw a card. And then its activate main for the spirit boost skill becomes, you can choose something in your opponent's battle area or their drop area that costs 4 or less, so you can start clearing your opponent's board, which is nice. Most of the time this is only really relevant to take combo power off of the opponent's board, or if they have a nice double striker or a dual attacker or something, you can just take that and then gain the skills. Important to note as well, the on-attack autos are both once per turn on your leader, to prevent them being abused with dual attack or triple attack skills. But that's not massively relevant. Most of the time you won't see a dual attacker that you can take, but in the case that you can, you can't then double trigger on the auto. And then your leader gains another skill, which is honestly very rarely used in this version of the deck, because this version is pivoted towards an aggressive playstyle, which is an activate main. Once per turn, you put 2 cards under your leader into the drop area, and then your leader gains 5k power until your next turn. So it kind of acts as a bean for your leader, but most of the time you're not doing this, because you need the cards under your leader for your aggressive plays, for the union absorbs. And then most of the time your opponent's not going to have another turn after you've awakened. You kind of want to kill them on turn 3 if you can, sometimes even on turn 2 if you draw exactly the right cards. But this deck is extremely aggressive, and personally I'm a control player, but this is one of the very few aggressive decks that I actually enjoy because I think it's very innovative. I think it's very just quite fun to play. Like, the deck does a lot of stuff for the cards that it has, which is really cool. It just keeps extending and extending, and it feels very rewarding to play because there's a lot of cool sequencing that you can do to maximize the most out of your plays. So we'll get straight on with the cards in the deck. To start off, we've got the 2 Majin Buu 1-drops. So I'm running 4 of the first one and 3 of the second one. The first one, they both have the same Union Absorb skill, which is you can put a card from under your leader under this 1-drop, and then play a 4-drop green Majin Buu from your deck with 15k power, which currently there's only 1 target of in the deck. This version of the deck is not using the new Champ Pack card, just because I personally haven't tested it with it yet, but I believe the new Champ Pack Majin Buu is another target as well. And then the one that we're running 4 copies of has an auto when it's played, you draw a card, and then the one we're running 3 copies of has an auto of when it's played, you search the top 5 cards for a green Majin card. Good luck hitting that, because you tend not to hit the top 5, which is why we're only running 3 of the top 5 and 4 of the draw 1. You can definitely go up to 4 of the other 1-drop if you would like, and it maximizes consistency of seeing the 1-drops early on, which you do want to happen because they're your playmakers. But I've found that just 7 copies is fine. Most of the time you'll see one by at least turn 2, and turn 2 is kind of... It's not great to see it on turn 2, but it could be worse, and seeing it on turn 1 is obviously the optimal turn to see it. So we'll go on to the target for the 1-drops is this 4-drop Majin Buu, the 4-drop 15k. It has an evolve skill, which you don't need to worry about. It has a permanent. This card has a lot of skills. So this permanent says that if this card would be removed from the battle area by one of your opponent's skills, you can kill one of your Majin tokens instead. Then it has an auto. When it's played, you can search for your green Unison that has 1k power from your deck to your hand, and then you have to discard a card. Spoiler alert, we're also only playing 1 green Unison with 1k power. I think there's only 1 target in the game currently, but we're only playing the 1 anyways. And then we have an activate main, limit 1, spirit boost 1. You can play a Majin token, which has 15k power and 5k combo power for 0 combo cost. And then you can optionally take a life after you play the token. So this is, of course, going to be really nice just because you get 2 15k bodies for effectively 1 energy from one of your Union Absorbs, and you also get to search your Unison. It's really annoying that they added a discard to the search skill, but there are some cards that you play in the deck that are more helpful in the drop area, and you can just start discarding cards like Dormant and some of the cards that don't have combo power when you're going in for the kill. Something important to note with this card is, even if you have copies of the Unison either in your hand or in play, you still want to be searching for the Unison, because what you can do is you can search the Unison and then just discard the copy you searched. And the reason you would do that is to thin your deck out, because you want to be aggressively super comboing in this deck just to search for your finishes, and so if you draw more Unisons, it's going to clog up your hand a lot more. So you just always search the Unison just for the ability to deck thin, so that you can try and find your finishes more quickly and more efficiently. And then the limit 1 spirit boost 1 skill is really nice, and it gives you extra self-awakening. So it means if you're going second and your opponent attacks you once, you can awaken on turn 2 with this card, because you attack on your turn 1 because you've gone second, you flip a life under your leader, and then you play your 1-drop on turn 1, and then turn 2 you can attack again. You've gone down to 5 life, and then you can, once you've got the 4-drop out, you can, and your Unison to spirit boost off of as well, you can then take the last life and go down to 4 life, and then you have the ability to awaken. And that's generally the play that you want to go towards with this deck, is awakening on turn 2, having a green and a blue energy, and just going completely nuts. But moving on, we have the Unison here. So this is obviously the search target of the 4-drop Buu. Something else that's important to note is the 4-drop Buu Both of the 1-drops can play it from either your deck or your drop area, so even if you've gone through all 4 copies, you can still play them from the drop area, but it also means if you have extra copies of the 4-drop in your hand, when you go to search your Unison, you can discard copies of your 4-drop, and then they're live to be played off of your 1-drops once you've gone through all 4 in your deck. And so you kind of don't want to have them in your hand, you want to have them in your drop area or your deck, so discarding them or even aggressively comboing them sometimes is worth it just to keep having the ability to keep playing them, because this is the main card that you want to be playing. So onto the Unison. This Unison also has a ridiculous amount of text. Its permanent says, if you have a battle card with the Servant skill in play in your battle area, in rest mode, your opponent can't attack this card, so Servant battle cards effectively act as deadly defenders for your Unison, which is really nice because it means the fact that the Unison has 1k power means it's obviously quite vulnerable, but the deadly defender skill helps it out a lot, and it's not restricted to just battle cards can't attack it, it's just it can't be attacked. So even leader cards and other Unison cards that your opponent has can't attack this Unison if you have the Servant in rest mode. It has an auto once per turn when you remove a marker from this card using Spirit Boost, which you have a lot of Spirit Boost skills in your leader and the 4-drop. Then this Unison gains Overlord for the turn, so you can recycle your Servants if you don't need them and draw extra cards. And then the +2 is you choose one of your mono-green Majin Buu cards with an original power of 15k and or less in rest mode in your battle area, and the chosen card gains Servant until the end of your opponent's next turn. So a couple of things nice to note with this is obviously it sets up the Unison's permanent and the Unison's auto because it gives you a Servant card in rest mode. So the Unison then can't be attacked, but you can also trigger the Overlord to bottom deck something and draw a card. The targets for this +2, by the way, are the 4-drop Majin Buu is the main one, but you can also use it on your 1-drops if you really need to. Because it has, the 1-drops have 15k power or less, but most of the time you're just using this on the 4-drops. And because the 4-drop then gains the Servant skill, it goes up to base 25k power, which is why the card has to be in rest mode so that you're not then swinging for 25k as well. So most of the time you're sequencing your turns to swing early on with the 4-drop and then get the most out of your +2, because you need a lot of the Spirit Boosts to start off your turns most of the time, because then you want to be playing the token, you want to be getting cards under your leader to do more absorbing, and that's generally how you start your turns off. So you want to get the most value out of the +2 early on as you can by putting the 4-drop in rest mode by swinging with it. And then also the fact that the Servant falls off at the end of your opponent's turn means that your 4-drop then restands on your turn, where the Servant skill would stop it from restanding when you go to charge, which is of course very nice because it means you don't lose out any attacks in any future turns. But if you are going for the kill swing, rather than just protecting your Unison for the opponent's next turn, because in theory they won't have a next turn, you can just use the Overlord to bottom deck a 4-drop, draw a card, get that extra card for the extra combo power or for the extra plays, and it also gives you another 4-drop in your deck. So if you are in a situation where you have 3 4-drops on the board and 1 in life, or 4 4-drops on the board, or you have some in hand that you don't want to combo out yet, you can bottom deck your 4-drops on the board that you've already swung with and then just immediately play them back out off of your 1-drops again. It does lose you the Unison protection, but if you're going to kill them that turn, you don't need to protect a Unison because they're going to be dead. And then, of course, we're playing a green Unison, we're playing a green leader. We're going to play 4 Dormant and 4 Freezer. Dormant is the main way that we have to protect ourselves in this deck, and then Freezer is, of course, some extra protection and some extra board removal, just stopping your opponent plays to continue aggressing. And then the Freezer, if you play it when your opponent's leader isn't awakened yet, it's an actual valuable swinger because it swings 10k into 10k, and in an aggro deck that's actually fairly relevant. And then it's also a target for Zamasu Deity's Wrath, which we are running in this deck as well. So against those slower decks, you can just rely on having some Zamasus out and then whittling their hand down as you go. You can go into a more hand control route. But even against aggro or mid-range decks, getting those Zamasus out just for a 20k body for 1 energy that discards a card is really helpful. But these are the 2 main ways that you have to protect yourself in this deck. if you overextend in any way, or if you're just against another aggro deck that you need the defense against. And then the other card that we use to defend ourselves more is the 2 copies of the Majin Buu Unadulterated Malice. And this is, of course, our effectively topo for the deck. It has a similar skill to the topo negate. But it has more use in this deck than it would other green decks because it has the Union Absorb skill, which is, of course, live in this deck because this card was originally intended for this archetype. So if this 2-drop sticks around coming into your turn, you have an extra body to Union Absorb on top of, which is, of course, really helpful. And other than that, those are the 6 or 10 cards, if you're including the freezer, to use to defend yourself. And as you can see, we're mostly relying on floodgates to negate attacks and defend ourselves, rather than using any sort of just hard negates. And I have tested homicidal clones in this deck, and it just doesn't work, I'll be honest. It does not feel very good from when I tested it. And the reason for that is because we're most of the time that we're defending, we're going to be using floodgates, and so they're only going to be attacking once more most of the time if you're using dormant, and if you're using Buu, then they're probably not attacking again. And so the homicidal clones, you kind of want to use it over the course of 2 attacks, so if they're only attacking once more, the homicidal clones loses a lot of value, because you then don't get to use the blocker. And then if they're not attacking at all, then Homicidal Clones is going to be a mute card anyways. So I ended up replacing Homicidal Clones just for more aggressive pieces, because I feel like these are the only defensive cards that you need in the deck. And then we'll go on to the blue package. So this Hercule is what makes the deck pop, and why you run the deck blue-green. So far, from what we've seen, everything aside from the Bupo Negate costs 1 or 0 effective energy, right? And that's why this deck is so aggressive, because everything is super cheap. So what the Hercule does is, when this card is played, you choose a Majin Buu card in your battle area, and then you can choose a Majin Buu card underneath that card that costs 1 energy, and then play it into your battle area, and then if you played a card, you draw a card. So what you can do is, you have your 4-drop out that you've already swung with, you play Hercule, choose the 4-drop, choose the 1-drop underneath the 4-drop, play the 1-drop, draw a card from Hercule, and then either draw a card from the 1-drop or top 5 search from the other 1-drop, and then you have another Union Absorb target, and an effective Pot of Greed for 1 energy, which is insane, and another 2 bodies, which is... the Hercule is especially relevant against yellow, because it's another body that you can rest for riposte, that's also drawing you cards and also giving you another swing, because you're playing another 4-drop on the 1-drop that you play off of the Hercule. So this card is really insane, and this is, in my opinion, the reason why this deck should be played green-blue rather than just mono-green. You can obviously go mono-green with a more hand control and slower-paced rote, but I think that this deck is just pivoted towards a more aggressive playstyle with all the cheap free play stuff that it can do, and with the Hercule the Hercule just extends its plays so much, and it's why you want to charge a mono blue energy on turn 2, because turn 1 you'll have your 1-drop and you'll have your 1-drop which goes into your 4-drop on the board, or you'll have gone into the 4-drop already depending on the matchup. Then turn 2 you can play your Unison, play your Hercule, and then you should be able to awaken at that point, because you'll be at 4 life once you swung with your leader that turn. You can awaken, untap the blue, and then start abusing the next blue card, which I'll show, which is probably have been guessed by you guys at this point, is the 4 copies of the Senzubin, which is again what makes this deck just go completely nuts. Because as I've already mentioned, everything we've seen so far other than the Bupo is going to be 1 or 0 energy. And so you just use Bean to play more stuff, right? And this deck draws an incredible amount on turn 2 and turn 3 because of the Hercule. And so you're able to draw your beans very, very quickly. And then once you draw your beans, you can play more stuff. And once you play more stuff, you draw more stuff. And then you draw more beans, you play more stuff. It just keeps going. This deck does not run out of gas for a very, very long time. And the only thing that really hinders this deck is floodgate negates like Riposte, or Heroic Prospects, or anything like that. But most of the time you're just waiting a turn and then doing it again the next turn. And that's especially another reason why I recommend siding 4 copies of Focus Breakthrough for this deck, is to deal with those decks that have those floodgates like Oceanus, like Heroic Prospects, like Riposte, because Focus Breakthrough will just blow them out completely. But yeah, 4 copies of Bean, because the card is really busted in decks that are not blue and decks that are blue. And then we kind of need 4 copies of a blue charge, because 8 blue cards is not going to be enough to consistently see a mono blue card turn 1, or turn 2, sorry. So we upped it to 12, and I think the best other 1-drop blue card that we can play in this current format is Isekai, because it especially helps against yellow, but it also just generally helps against other decks, like even the aggressive decks like U7 Goku are playing stuff during the opponent's turn with their Videl counterplays and their Goku counterplays and their Yamcha counterplays. Most of the time this is just a blue charge, because it's the weaker of the 12 blue cards that you run in the deck, but there are matchups where it's definitely helpful, and where you want to take a slower pace and you want to go more of a hand control route with your Zamasus and your other hand control cards, and you can just sit on a couple of Isekais and whittle their hand down slowly. And then once their hand is fairly low, you can start putting on the pressure with a wide board of 4-drops and abusing beans. So you want to pick your kill turn very wisely in this deck, depending on your the deck your opponent's playing in the matchup. And then going on to the finishers, so currently we've got some good aggressive early game stuff, like early turn stuff, I guess, to pressure your opponent to awaken and to pressure them down to 2 or 3 life. We don't really have an end game plan, so we have a couple of finishers which we're running in the deck. The first is the Goku Spirit Bomb Unleashed, and I reckon 2 copies of this is the ideal number. Like I mentioned before, you often want to super combo aggressively to find these finishers so that you can close out the game on turn 2 or turn 3. And so you want to have a good number of finishers in the deck. And I think 2 copies of the Spirit Bomb Goku is really nice, because your Unison can often gain quite a few markers just because it's got a +2 skill, and you're often sliding other copies of the Unison underneath to gain an extra marker so that you can abuse more of your Spirit Boost skills. And your Unison is only 1k, so it's never going to swing at them, and if you're going in for the kill turn, you don't need your Unison to survive, so you can just bottom deck your Servant card with the Unison to get an extra draw, and then drop Spirit Bomb Unleashed, and go in for a massive double strike swing. And again, this is only costing 1 energy, like this entire deck is super cheap in terms of energy, so Senzu Bean is completely busted. We are running 2 copies of Rosie. This is more for those slower matchups, those matchups where you'll see a lot of floodgate negates come out from your opponent, so you'll have to take a back seat, or even those matchups where your opponent is running beans to use defensively, because a lot of your swings are going to be 15k, so it's a little bit harder to get over a 20k leader. So this card is coming down on turn 4, because you're most of the time only charging the 1 blue energy on turn 2. And so this card comes down on turn 4, and this card of course has inherent synergy with Senzu Bean, because you can bean this up to a 20k triple attacker, and then you can also restand 2 of your green energy if you don't have any blue energy plays in your hand, and so you can then keep aggressing with your 4-drops. But it's also just a really good card, and a really nice aggressive card, and a nice aggressive finisher, because of the fact that it's a 15k triple attacker that discards 2 cards from your opponent's hand. So once you've whittled your opponent's resources down with your earlier turns, like turn 2 and turn 3, where you're swinging with a load of the 4-drops and a load of the tokens, they'll be on a very low hand size by that point, and you can just drop a Rosie on them. And if you've got a Bean, even better, but most of the time Rosie is honestly enough to finish the game. And you just swing with the Rosie a load, and that'll be most of the time a GG. And then our overarm choice is the SS4 Bardock fighting against Fate. There have been times where I've considered upping this to 2, but I think that 1 is enough personally. I find that you find this enough times with your super combos, or just the natural draw power this deck has. And it's the optimal overarm for this deck, because you want to be killing them as soon as possible. I am also running one of the Double Strike Kai. This is, again, another way to push a finisher, because this deck, other than the Spirit Bomb Unleashed Goku, doesn't really have any inherent double strikers, so you can just slam this on a Bardock, on a Rosie, on a 4-drop Buu, anything you want really, and you'll be able to push through onto your opponent from 2 life. And because this deck draws such an insane amount, like there have been times where I've had like 13 or 14 cards in this deck in my hand by like turn 3. You'll often be able to outcombo whatever your opponent has, especially if you've still got super combos that you haven't used. So this card just has inherent synergy with the deck. Secret rare of choice is going to be Pan. It offers you some extra defense and an extra floodgate, but the main reason is because it's going to be a 40k swinger for free. And this card is pretty much always going to be live in this deck because you flood the board such a ridiculous amount with your 1-drops and 4-drops. Because everything costs like 1 or no energy. You can see still, other than Rosie and Bupo, everything costs 1 energy at most, which is insane for this deck because you're able to then abuse Bean to play any card that you want during the turn, which is why this deck pops off on turn 2 so incredibly hard. But Pan is of course just a really strong aggressive and defensive card. Mostly aggressive because it's a 40k swinger that can then steal something. But you can use it as a defensive card if you don't have a Dormant or a Bupo to rely on, so you can use it defensively as well. Personally, I've been running Kibito Kai when I played in the Upper Hand tournament, but that's just because I don't own Pan. Kibito Kai works absolutely fine. I've even ran Salzino before I owned Kibito Kai in this deck, and that worked fine as well because you just sack off 3 of your 4-drops and play Salzino as another 40k swinger. There's a lot of secret rares you can run in this deck, and this deck honestly doesn't massively need a secret rare. So if you're playing this deck on a budget and you don't want this, or you don't own a secret rare for this deck, just don't play the secret rare. And to be honest, this deck is a fairly strong budget deck. If you already have like all of the green staples like the Dormants, the Freezes, the Spirit Bomb Unleashed, and the Rosies, this deck is going to be extremely cheap. The entire archetype is made out of commons and rares, and then other than that you just need like the Hercule promo, which is going to be pennies as well. So this could be a fairly strong budget option for those looking for it as well. Super combo of choice is of course going to be Defending Father Paragus. We go down to 4 life extremely early in this deck, turn 2 most of games, if not turn 3. So it's pretty much always going to be live, and you want to be aggressively super comboing. Like I've been saying throughout this whole video, it's really important to aggressively super combo to search for your finishers once you chip your opponent down to 4 or less life, because that's where you can start to look to actually kill them. And of course, on top of that, the Paragus is going to be pushing harder onto your opponent because you're going to be getting the free 10k from a super combo. But Paragus is just the best green super combo to use to search your, or to deck thin and to search for your finishes, because it draws you 2 and then you warp a card. There could be an argument for running the Great Saiyaman super combo, because you can bottom deck your super combo. You can bottom deck your unisons and your 4-drops and then just keep searching them out. But personally, I just find Paragus is better because most of the time you're starting to super combo once you've gone through a lot of your 4-drop and unison chain. And so you don't want to be putting them back because then they'll just be dead draws later on, because oftentimes you then can't search them again because you've used most of the chains anyway. And then the last card in the deck, I've already mentioned it, but it's just the 2 copies of the Fused Zamasu Deity's Wrath. And again, this is a very nice aggressive card. It comes down on turn 3, which is oftentimes where you're looking to kill your opponent is turn 3. Turn 2 to turn 4 is like this deck's strong point. Turn 4 is where it starts to fall off, but that's why I'm running the Rosie to try and give it that last push through before the deck dies on turn 5. But Zamasu just comes out at this deck's like peak of strength, I guess. On turn 3 is where this deck really shines. Turn 2 and turn 3, I'd say. And so this card is just really nice. 1 energy for a 20k swing that rips a card out your opponent's hand. And this card is also your access into a longer game, because against those longer game decks, you can just sit on a couple of copies of this. And I definitely recommend siding probably a 3rd copy of this, along with maybe some Ribrians for those longer game decks, like blue, just generally blue decks most of the time that's going to be. Because sitting on a couple of these and then being able to discard your Ribrians off of your 4-drop effects, and then be able to tap 2 for those turns where you're not really do anything to make them discard more, is really strong. And this deck can definitely pivot into a more hand control focused deck for the matchups that it's good against. And that's why I'd recommend siding the extra Zamasu and probably 3 copies of Ribrian just for those slower decks, along with the 4 Focus Breakthrough. 4 Focus Breakthrough is extremely good in this deck, just to stop all those floodgates that will come down. But that's pretty much the deck. That's all the advice that I think I have to give. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you do want to give this deck a try, I really recommend checking out my gameplay of it, which I'll have linked in the description. And I'll probably be streaming some more of this deck very soon, and I know I'm going to be releasing more gameplay of it soon as well, for a different tournament which I'm taking part in. But I really enjoy this deck. I definitely recommend you try it out. It's extremely rewarding to play because of the sequencing, but it's also very fun to play because you just get to play so much on each turn, especially when you see those Senzu Beans and you just really pop off. But definitely stay tuned for more gameplay, which I'll upload, and check out the gameplay, which I've already mentioned. Check out my streams as well, because I'm probably going to stream some more games of this. I really love this deck. It's really good fun to play. And other than that, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.